Hey everyone, welcome to the Cathleen Scott podcast. I am so excited to be here. I have a very distinguished guest. We are here with Anna Eskamani, who is the House District 42 representative in Orlando and basically a rock star legislator. I mean, there's so much to say about the things that she has already done as a Orlando native. She has 2 bachelors, 2 masters, and a PhD in public affairs. So sounds like she's probably one of the smarter ones on the, the state legislature. And we're going to talk a little bit about you and what it means to be a legislator here in Florida. And you're a Democrat. I should have said that up front. A progressive Democrat. That can't be easy in today's current climate.
God. Yeah. No, it's rough. It's rough, but it's also very mission driven for me. And, my values are grounded in my personal story of growing up in Florida in a working class family. And so I really appreciate the invitation to be here. And of course, thanks for all your work too, and supporting workers and like-minded organizations and holding it down in your part of the state, because it takes all of us to try to push for progress here.
It really does. And so this is one of the busiest legislative sessions that I can ever remember. You must be exhausted.
Always. Always.
So I heard that towards the end, and it's a long legislative session that we had too. I heard 84 bills were pushed to the governor's desk.
So it was longer by days for sure. I mean, we were over 100 days, which session is supposed to be only 60 days long. And there was a lot of tension within the Republican caucus, actually, that led to these delays. And the number of bills that passed were less than usual, despite the elongated session. But it just speaks to a lot of the tension that kind of took over the environment.
Yeah, and so just for our listeners who may not know, Florida has sort of an unusual signing into law process, right? So the governor can either veto a bill once it comes in, once it's passed, or he can sign it into law. Or this is somewhat unique to Florida, I think. He can wait 15 days and it becomes law by default. So,
absolutely.
And I guess some of those happened this time. One in particular is the so-called Choice Act, which we could talk about.
Yeah, well, and it's such a ridiculous name. And I was telling you before we went on air, I've never heard this bill be referred to as the Choice Act, but this is essentially a bill being pushed really by Ken Griffin, but it seems to benefit a lot of the financial institutions in general, as essentially expanding non-compete agreements. And we all know that non-competes stifle competition for workers. They lock people into jobs that might not be the best place or fit for them, but it also makes it much more difficult for us to attract top talent. It's anti-free market. It's policy that the Biden administration was actually going after through the FTC with a lot of fanfare. I mean, from bartenders to hairdressers to those who work in more of these white collar jobs, everybody was supporting pulling back on non-competes. And this bill showed up and it kind of came out of nowhere. And I actually sparred with the bill sponsor offline many times about it, and she couldn't answer basic questions offline about the so-called benefits of this bill. But yeah, it's really bad. And
I was shocked at how restrictive it is. I'm a labor and employment lawyer by background. I litigate these issues. And so I think it's interesting you referenced the FTC. So, the FTC did all this research and found that when individuals sign a non-compete, and particularly single parents, they're afraid to take those better paying jobs because they don't have the legal resources to fight these restrictive covenants. And there's a lot of people walking around, saying, oh, they're not worth the paper they're written on. But we live in one of 11 states nationwide that allows this type of restriction. And I found it stunning when I read the legislative findings of the bill. They said 2 things. They said, 1, the current protections for confidentiality, trade secrets are inadequate. And they said another thing, which was you need to have predictability with employment contracts. And I just don't see how this bill does either one of those 2 things. And just to put a finer point on it, so the current restrictive covenant statute remains in effect. So this new one affects just the non-competes. And it expands the restrictions for 4 years. 4 years, an employee can be locked down into not working in their specialty. I don't know of any other state that has that type of restriction in it.
And it also attempts to even expand its reach. I mean, some parts of this statute could be defined to impact an employee that maybe doesn't live in Florida but works for a company that's in Florida, it could even impact them stretching into their state. And it also could impact folks who work maybe in an office space or are an assistant to someone, but not with that company, that might, to some degree, right, have access to maybe a Rolodex or access to cleaning up their office. So you even have the ripple effect on folks who are not making a high wage, right? Who could also be caught up in this. It's based on the potential broadness of its interpretation. So it was a really, really frustrating bill to try to stop, just knowing the money that was behind it. And of course, Mr. Griffin's a huge donor to Ron DeSantis. And when I see those lines start getting connected, the dots getting connected, you just know this bill is going to be very hard to pass.
Well, you can see the footprint clearly. I mean, so in the financial sector, non-compete's very common, as you know, and they typically are coupled with what's called garden leave, right? So which means that the employer can choose to pay the employee and the employee can sit out. What I can't believe is not being discussed in every media or by anyone who represents employees or cares about employee rights is this really important point in the bill. The bill says you can get up to 4 years of restriction, and it references the definition of garden leave, but one is not required for the other. So in other words, there's no requirement that an employer pay an employee to sit out. They don't have to. It's stunning.
It's crazy.
The original, the current statute 542.335, which is the predecessor, which remains in effect, it uses the language competition. We want to protect employers from unfair competition. So you can't take all their employee secrets or the employer secrets, go across the street, open up a competitive business. That makes sense. And so Florida's always done this balancing test. The new statute says similar. It doesn't use the word competitive. It uses the word similar. So what is similar? You can stop a person from working in a similar job. That could be anything, really.
Right. Yeah. No, you're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. No, it is insane. It is such bad legislation, and it did not get the attention that it deserves at all, which is, of course, why I'm so grateful that you're talking about it, because we have to ring the alarm bells on this.
Yeah, and I think it's important to say that the governor didn't sign it into law. It became law by inaction. On July 3rd was the 15th day, and so it's it's automatically now the law because of that weird
And it's probably
Florida.
because he knows how unpopular this is, right? And he doesn't want his hands on it, but he was never going to veto it because it's his donor that wants it. Another example of just cronyism in politics and how, these same politicians who say they're going to clean the swamp are the swamp and are just creating their own. I mean, it's just so frustrating.
It's never been more important, I think, for an employee to hear that if you're presented with a non-compete, particularly after July 1, 2025, thanks to Ron DeSantis, you now have to contend with this onerous statute. And I want employees to know that, you can be enjoined for up to 4 years. And the injunction part of the statute is also very, very anti-employee. It says the court shall enjoin any employee and the new employer from any similar work, not competitive work, similar work. And and only if with clear and convincing evidence can the employee undo that. So I want to push back on the legislature's idea that somehow this is pro-business, because businesses have to hire employees, and who are they going to hire if everyone's going to be sitting out for 4 years? How are they going to attract the talent that they need? It's shocking. Absolutely shocking.
Truly. Yep. I mean, the reality is that non-competes push good people out of our state because they realize they don't have the type of flexibility that would allow them to actually choose their career paths and expand upon it. And so, this is bad for business.
I think it may be an unlawful restraint on trade because it doesn't use competition as the guiding principle, and it has these onerous evidentiary standards. It says that also, another interesting point, it says healthcare providers are exempt from the bill, but then in the same light, in the same breath, it says, but anybody not covered by the statute is covered by the old statute. So I just want to make sure that clarity gets out there. There's no protection for healthcare providers really in this bill.
Nope.
It's
Absolutely.
very much pro-employer. And then in that point, who knows if it's really pro-employer? I'm not sure it gives anybody the certainty that we were hoping for in those contracts. All right, so a lot more to talk about. I saw that you had a press release and that you signed a letter about Governor DeSantis's immigration so-called Executive Order 2303, which for the listeners, a little background. In January 2023, DeSantis signed an executive order saving Florida from what he viewed as a state of an emergency. I think he referred to it as the disaster of people coming in to the state of Florida who didn't have documented status and needing to create a state of emergency. So what does that mean to people who are listening?
It basically means that Governor Ron DeSantis has been weaponizing his executive authority through an irrelevant and outdated executive order. So as you mentioned, this EO comes from 2 years ago, and it is what is granting him the authority to pursue his anti-immigrant agenda as we see today with the construction of the Everglades Immigration Detention Facility that is basically constructed by tents that are about 6 inches off the ground, detaining hundreds and up to thousands of individuals of immigrant descent, hundreds who have no criminal background and, of course, have no access to their attorneys or any other types of due process. He's weaponizing the fact that we have this executive order that he has renewed many times since 2023 that means he can have no big contracts. He can, at this point, detain individuals there despite not having any type of federal authority to do so. And our point with this letter is to highlight parts of this original executive order that just are not relevant anymore. Mm-hmm. You know, he mentions the Biden administration as his core reason to call an emergency 4 times. No longer relevant anymore. He also speaks to the number of individuals who are presenting at the border. Of course, this was dated back to 2023. He does not distinguish between asylum seekers, by the way, compared to those who don't have any status. But either way, we all know that because of Trump's anti-immigrant agenda, fear has spread across the world, and less individuals are coming to the United States, whether as immigrants or even as visitors right now. And so we cite that point as well. And our effort is to kind of elevate this point for the media and potentially pursue litigation as well, that the governor's executive order that he has weaponized to pursue the Everglades detention facility and to hunt down immigrants is no longer accurate, relevant, and should expire. And so that was our effort in issuing that letter. And of course, it's one battle I'm involved in of many. As you likely know, we made an unannounced visit to this detention facility on July 3rd as state lawmakers exercised our statutory authority of oversight. We were denied access, so we filed a lawsuit following that exchange. And then I did attend what was a curated and attempted sanitizing of the facility through a scheduled visit about 2 weeks ago. And I have to tell you that there's no way, Kathleen, that anyone can sanitize people in cages. And with that said, I have joined on the lawsuit that's filed by Friends of the Everglades and the Center for Biological Diversity on environmental concerns, which I do think is going to be one of our strongest pathways to closing this facility down. But now the state is trying delay tactics. They want to shop for judges, basically. And their latest accusation to the plaintiffs in this lawsuit is that they're in the wrong court, which we know it's not true, but it just speaks to how desperate the state of Florida is and how far they'll go in trying to continue their anti-immigrant agenda.
It's incredible. I mean, so as Floridians, we hear state of emergency, and we, often attribute that to like hurricanes and don't gouge us on gas prices and don't make water costs more and light bulbs or flashlights rather. So with the state of emergency authority, that gives DeSantis the right to have like relaxed agency requirements, as I understand it, right? So
he can even pause almost any law he wants. It is really unsettling. I mean, even background checks for individuals being hired by these no-bid contractors, those can be suspended. I mean, it's just quite alarming. And to your point, in the case of an actual emergency, like hurricane response, you can maybe empathize and understand, why that type of authority is needed. But for 2.5 years acting like this, I mean, it is unacceptable and it needs to stop.
Right. And I think in his original, the original draft of the original order that he signed, 2303, I know it's been like you said, extended many, many times. And I guess it's due to expire in August again. Right. And, to your letter, and maybe he'll reconsider. But he cites in there that the reasons it's needed is because there's like border crossings that are an all-time high. And he says in there it's basically a disaster. He uses the word disaster. And I find that to be so interesting. But now, right now, my understanding is border crossings are way down at this moment.
Correct.
And so that would seem to give a good argument to your position in the letter that, hey, I don't think the same stats are here and present now that they were at that time.
You're 100% accurate. And that's the point we're emphasizing in a letter as well is, remember the original catalyst for that executive order in 2023 was also based upon individuals seeking refuge from Haiti that arrived in the Florida Keys. They arrived basically by small boats in that environment. And so that has not happened since that isolated incident as well. So nothing in this executive order is accurate. And yet it has what has granted the governor the authority to seize land, to spend what will be more than $500 million in no-bid contracts, to detain individuals with no due process, to restrict their access to loved ones, to lawyers, et cetera, et cetera. And so regardless of your position on immigration, I think we can all agree that what's happening at this detention facility is unlawful, it is immoral, and it needs to stop. And ending the executive orders is one of the clearest ways to get to that goal.
What can average citizens do? I don't think these messages are getting out. We see little bits and pieces about what they're calling alligator Alcatraz on the news. We see this, the hype, we see the gaslighting, we see there's the short blips on the news, but I'm so worried that people hear these details about what you're explaining to the immigration, what we're talking about with the choice bill, and just either like, well, how am I supposed to think about it? And then they decide, what to do, and there's sort of no middle anymore, and there's no way to like get the facts out. And so one of the things I really try to do in my podcast is let's just talk about the facts and what's actually there. I think people need to understand where to get that information and how do we get that out to them. So, I mean, it's shocking to me that Florida passes a bill basically automatically and no one even knows that now restrictive covenants are 4 years. And if you said that to somebody, they go, oh, that's not true. And it's like, yes, it is. And we're kind of living in a media time where so much media is being published all the time, but it's just not the facts. It's so much different. It's such a hype.
I mean, you're absolutely correct of the misinformation and also almost like too much information, right? And it's hard to process. It's hard to know the best ways to get plugged in and to be effective in this environment. On the issue of immigration, I think there's a few dynamics to consider. One is we need to do everything we can on the ground in your neighborhood to protect everyone and to reduce harm. And a part of that is ensuring access to legal representation in the face of any type of immigration issue. The reality is that individuals who are working class are the dominant population of folks being detained right now. They have no criminal background. They were driving to work as construction, as roofers, as plumbers, as landscapers. They're getting racially profiled and pulled over by, most cases, Florida Highway Patrol, because they have a 287G agreement statewide, ask for their driver's license, they don't have one, and that leads to them getting arrested and eventually detained under an ICE hold and then into ICE custody. So to prevent that from happening, or to at least slow down that process, really does require knowing your rights. It requires clear access to an immigration attorney. It requires collaboration with the public defender's office to make sure that those who are facing a criminal charge and an immigration hold have representation. So we're doing that aggressively in Orange County. We're working very hard in pushing our county to renegotiate a contract with ICE at the jail to provide a legal helpline for those who are working class and can't afford an attorney. And so I do think at the local level, just trying to prevent people from being detained in the first place is key. And then, of course, if they do become detained, what are the safety nets to support folks in that situation, to lift up families who are impacted? And there's so many organizations, both local and statewide, to consider. I mean, in your backyard, you have Community Justice Project. Yep. They're amazing, and they are leading the lawsuit challenges statewide. alongside an organization called Florida Immigrant Coalition, known as FLIC. In my backyard, I have Orlando Center for Justice. The Florida Farm Workers Association is also statewide, alongside Hope Community Center. So I would identify organizations in your neighborhood, in your community, that are also defending immigrants and supporting immigrants, and ask them, what do they need? And I do think building that network of support across the state is going to be very important, because this is not going to end overnight. It's going to get worse before it gets better. So we really have to think long-term about our strategies. And also, I would say, everyone pick your piece of the planet to make better, and trust those that are fighting the big fights. I mean, I mentioned already, many lawsuits have been filed to stop the specific Everglades detention facility. Supporting those efforts is important. The organizations who are suing will need resources, but then find the role that you can play on the ground, right? And support folks at a local level, prevent them from being detained in the first place. That all makes a huge difference in keeping families together.
It does, and I think it's important to somehow immigrants all got branded as criminal. And these are, and I think it's an important thing to say that, no, these are people who are your neighbors. These
Absolutely.
are kids that go to school with your kids, that these are young people, these are old people, these are people who work, these are people who work hard, and they shop at your malls, they buy groceries at your grocery store, they use your bank, they are part of the economy, they are people, they are your neighbors. And the vast majority of individuals who are here are not criminals. And I just, it's so heartbreaking to hear that sort of that rebranding of that over and over again. And I think the lack of remembrance that our whole country was founded on the backs of workers who migrated here from other countries, and I think you have an interesting story you should share with us about your own family came here as well. So
Oh yeah. I mean, I remember my mom's citizenship ceremony. I was about 4 or 5 years old. We packed the Honda and drove to Miami for her ceremony. And it was a very difficult process. Both of my parents are immigrants from Iran. They came to this country at different times in their lives and met working the same donut shop in Orlando. As you can imagine, there is so much prejudice and stigma that they navigated, especially being of Iranian descent. And so my dad was actually really embarrassed to tell people his origin. My mom was the opposite, and she recognized my dad's accent. And so they started a family in Orlando. And so I always remember just the notions of feeling like an outsider, of trying to fit in. And of course, being a kid, I mean, you're just a kid. You don't, these are not really some of the images that have really just broken my heart and are just my motivating factors are the images in courtrooms across America where you have immigrant families that are dressed for their court hearings. They're holding their manila envelope of legal documents, or doing things the right way. And then they're getting pulled away and separated from their families. And I mean, it's just I think about families like mine. I mean, I just saw a video earlier today of a Iranian dad. He's a doctor, he's a professor, with his child in the back seat, and law enforcement pulls him over. He's taking his kid to daycare, and they break through his window and they pull him out. And his visa was actually fine. He just got married to a U.S. citizen. He's going through the process, did the interview and everything. And it just breaks my heart, because it's these are families that have fled persecution in their home countries to then experience persecution here. And we should be ashamed that is the reality for our fellow Floridians and for our future Americans. I mean, it's just something that will never sit well with me, and not only from a personal perspective of growing up in an immigrant family, but obviously from a humanitarian perspective. It's just not. I refuse to accept that is who we are as Americans. I cannot fathom that being our foundation, knowing our history, and knowing, of course, the motivation for so many people to call this country home.
We had ICE raids here. I'm in Jupiter, Florida. We had ICE raids here not long ago, and I was, walking my dog, and it was really unsettling to see people just getting pulled over, pulled off the back of a landscaping truck, and being, taken away in big black vehicles, like something out of a movie. You just, till you see it, you really can't, I know. All right. So I'll wrap it up. Okay. All right. So we had ice raids here in Jupiter, Florida, and it was really unsettling. And I was thinking, that's one parent that's not coming home.
Right. I mean, and it's just no way I will ever sit comfortably with that. And I think what really frustrates me is Democrats in particular who have been afraid to talk about immigration because they see it as, a quote, unpopular subject. Now, to be clear, we need to champion housing affordability. We need to champion food security. As you know, I'm really big on corporate accountability, closing corporate tax loopholes. We just talked about non-competes. And we have to champion these economic policies that support all of our families. But I'm a firm believer that you could fight many fights at once. And so I'm going to share the stories of the positive impacts of immigrants. I'm going to amplify how the Everglades detention facility needs to close and the conditions in all of our detention centers, whether they are our state prisons or federal or county jails or immigrant detention centers, need to substantially improve to meet basic standards of humanity. And I'm going to do my part to shift the narrative. I can't be afraid of these conversations, but I do think one reason why we've gotten this bad is because there has been hesitation to counter the rhetoric, and we cannot be afraid. We have to embrace these courageous conversations and share our stories and hold the line and as who we are as Americans.
Yeah, nothing gets done unless you get a little uncomfortable sometimes.
Absolutely.
Okay. Wish you well in your luck and your run for mayor of 2027. Keep up all the good work and all the things that you're doing to make the world a better place. We appreciate you. And thank you so much for coming on the Cathleen Scott podcast.
Thank you so much for having me. And I know I'll be back soon and keep up the great work in South Florida. I know that you have a friend here in Orlando holding down the line. And if folks ever want to learn more about us and our race, you can visit anafororlando.com or anaforflorida.com for updates about our work in the legislature.
Awesome. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Cathleen Scott podcast. We hope this was fun and informative. We'll catch you on the next one. You can find us online at scottlawteam.com or floridalaborlawyer.com. Thank you for joining.